One of the top behavioral geneticists in the world is a man named Robert Plomin. And a few months ago, I had the chance to talk with him on the phone about behavioral genetics, how genetics impacts our habits and choices, and what this all means and what we should make of it. And one of the interesting things that came out of our discussion is that, first of all, genetics plays a really big role in our habits and choices throughout each day. We often don't talk about it or don't want to avoid it because we don't like the idea that some of our abilities are fixed. But it makes sense, and it makes sense from a physical standpoint. For example, height is at least 80% heritable. So how tall you are is determined mostly on your genes and what's passed down to you. And that makes sense to most of us. If we have really tall parents, we tend to be tall. If we have shorter parents, we tend to be short. And nobody's too upset about that fact. But physical characteristics are just one way that genetics are passed down to us. And intelligence and memory and working memory and comprehension speed and a variety of other mental characteristics are also passed down through genetics. IQ, for example, which is just one measure of intelligence, but is a common one. IQ is 60 to 80% heritable, depending on how you analyze it. And so our genes do play a significant role on whether or not we can achieve certain things or accomplish a particular task, build a particular habit, for example, in the case of this course. So given that, it raises some interesting questions like, what should we do about this? Or are there certain habits that we just can't build? Or how do we operate given the constraints that each one of us has, given that genetics does impact pretty much every behavior that we perform, at least to some degree. And given that we can't really control our genetics, what do we do about it? To answer this question, I'd like to share an interesting example. And it comes from the sports world, and specifically the Olympics. So Michael Phelps, who is arguably one of the greatest athletes of his generation, and certainly the greatest swimmer of his generation, is about 6 foot 4 inches tall, and he has a really interesting body type for swimming, which is that most of his height is wrapped up in his torso. Now, if we compare Phelps to Hicham El Guerrouj, who is the top mile runner in the world and one of the best distance runners in the world, he currently holds the world record for the mile and for the 1,500 meters. He is 7 inches shorter than Michael Phelps, but Phelps and El Guerrouj have the exact same inseam length. So their legs are basically the same length. The difference is for the runner, all of his height is wrapped up in his legs, and for Phelps, all of his height is wrapped up in his torso. Now, this is just a genetic difference, right? Like they didn't get a choice on how long their legs were or how long their torso was. But the type of body that they have and the genetics that they have is organized for the type of event that they excel in. If you were to take Michael Phelps, for example, and try to have him compete in the mile run or the 1,500 meters, it's very unlikely that he would qualify for the Olympics. And similarly, if you were to take El Guerrouj and ask him to qualify in the 100-meter freestyle or the 200-meter backstroke, he also probably would not qualify for the Olympics. But when you place them in a different environment, in a different context, their genetics makes them the best in the world at what they happen to do. And this, I think, is the answer to how we manage the genetics that we have and the deck of cards, so to speak, that we have been dealt. This idea that we all have a unique set of characteristics and talents and genetic abilities, and that we should play to our strengths, it's been known and practiced for thousands of years. The ancient military strategist Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War, was a huge fan of only fighting battles that he could win, only operating in environments where it was to his advantage. And that's the same type of concept that we're talking about here. Your genetic abilities, the gifts that you were born with, the options that you have at your disposal based on your genetic makeup, they give you certain advantages and also give you certain disadvantages. And like Sun Tzu, there's no need to fight a battle that isn't going to operate or perform in your favor. The idea is to only fight battles where you are at your strength, where you are at your advantage. And so let's talk about a way to do this. And if you click on the worksheet below this video, I'd like you to go through an exercise where you list out the habit that you're looking to achieve, but I want you to list out as many barriers as possible as you can come up with that prevent you from doing it. So, for example, if you want to start a habit of writing a book each day, working on your writing habit, well, then you could list out all the distractions and interruptions that come into play. You could list out all the things that prevent you from coming up with good writing ideas. You could list out the technological constraints, anything that you can think of. And the idea here is to try to get a sense of which barriers are specific to you and your genetic makeup and which ones are just things that you could optimize in your environment. If they're environmental barriers, well, then that's a really good thing because you could just shift it. If it's a genetic barrier, if it's something that, it just doesn't seem like you're that good at, then you need to come at the habit from a different angle. There's no sense in trying to fight a battle that you're going to have trouble to win. So go ahead and do that now, and then I'll see you in the next lesson.